It has been described as one of the oldest professions in history, an industry that can't, and some would say shouldn't, be abolished. Everyone these days has an opinion on prostitution, the overall sex industry and its place in society. For me, it's simple. Anything that contributes to gender inequality and allows for the purchase of one human being for the gratification of another is not only unacceptable, it is fundamentally and morally wrong. Ireland's current approach to the regulation of prostitution is partial criminalisation, whereby the sale or purchase of sexual services in Ireland is currently not criminalised, provided it is conducted out of the public eye and with some activities associated with prostitution, such as pimping, soliciting in public or brothel keeping being a crime. It is also an offence to organise prostitution, coerce or compel a person to be a prostitute, or knowingly live on the earnings of a prostitute. The rationale behind these offences is the protection of prostitutes and an attempt to protect society from the nuisance and public order problems associated with prostitution. However, the buying and selling of sex indoors remains protected by omission, under the presumption that this is a private contract between consenting adults. Since 2008, there is also specific legislation in relation to human trafficking, which makes it an offence to knowingly solicit or importune a trafficked person in any place for the purposes of prostitution. Prostitution by children is also outlawed. The nature of prostitution in Ireland has changed dramatically over the past decade. Street prostitutes, the most visible face of prostitution, have been outnumbered by off-street prostitutes who can be contacted over the internet or by phone. Many more foreign prostitutes operate in Ireland than a decade ago, and the true extent of the trafficking of women into and within Ireland for sexual exploitation is unknown. I strongly believe that prostitution is incompatible with contemporary values and that it is a serious social problem which can and should be attempted to be abolished. In reality, very few women choose to willingly engage in prostitution, with most who are involved having very few real choices. This issue must be addressed, and we must decriminalise the victims of this trade and give them the option of rehabilitation while targeting demand. It is for these reasons that I have created my private member's bill, the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Amendment Bill 2013, in line with the Swedish legislation. This bill sets out a number of offences for the purchase of sexual services that are initially intended to act as a deterrent and lead to serious consequences for repeat offenders. The bill makes provisions for the introduction of the criminalisation of the purchases of sexual services. It will reduce the demand for sexual services, thereby reducing the incidence of prostitution in society. And it will create a situation that will remove the attractiveness of prostitution and trafficking from organised criminal elements by creating the risk for purchasers of sexual services to be prosecuted, with the element of name and shame acting as a deterrent. The proposed new Section 7 of the 1993 Act makes it an offence for a person to actually engage or attempt to engage in any place a person for the purposes of buying sexual services. It also makes it an offence for a person in any place to obtain sexual services by means of prostitution. The proposed new Section 7 goes on to provide that first-time offenders will be liable to an on-the-spot fine. Second-time offenders will be liable to a Class C fine, currently a maximum of €2,500. And third-time and other repeat offenders will be liable to a Class B fine, a maximum of €4,000 and a possible jail term of up to 4 weeks. Section 4 inserts a new Section 7A into the 1993 Act so as to put in place the arrangements for the collection of the on-the-spot fines which are provided for in Section 3 of the bill. The proposed new Section A provides that a Garda may issue a fixed payment notice to a first-time offender. This requires the offender to pay a fine of €500 within 21 days. In respect of first-time offenders, a prosecution is only instituted where the payment is not made within that period. The language in the bill is gender neutral to accommodate both sexes' involvement in this exploitative industry. I would also like to quickly express my thanks and acknowledge the presence here today of representatives from the Turn Off the Red Light campaign who have been very supportive throughout the drafting of this bill. I understand that there were public hearings in recent months conducted by the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice, Defence and Equality, and that the Government is awaiting their finalised report. I am glad that this issue has been discussed. However, each day that goes by, women and girls are being exploited in the most degrading way, and I strongly believe that only the Swedish model can address this. And I know I'm not alone in this. Now is the time to take an affirmative stand on this issue. 1 in 4 sex buyers in Ireland, 24%, have come across women and girls who appeared trafficked, controlled or underage, according to a major survey on prostitution published recently by the Immigrant Council of Ireland. In addition, the findings showed that fear of a criminal record, jail time, or name in a local newspaper as having been selected as effective deterrents by sex buyers, and are only surpassed by fear of contracting disease. And the facts don't lie. In Sweden, a high-level inquiry headed up by a Supreme Court judge in 2010 showed that since the introduction of the ban in 1999, street prostitution has halved. In 1995, the estimated total of women in prostitution was 2,500 to 3,000, with 650 of those in the streets. In 2008, there were 350 advertised prostitutes on the internet and 300 on the streets. Some may say that all this legislation has done in Sweden and would do here is drive prostitution underground. But isn't prostitution already underground? If a sex buyer can find a prostitute in a hotel or some other establishment, then the Gardaí can find them too. What is needed here is a change in attitude and a shift in public opinion on prostitution. If people understand the dire living conditions and backgrounds of these women, they quickly realise it is not the glamorous, luxurious, empowering lifestyle that some believe it to be. The prostitute would be safer under this legislation because they would be the victim whereby they could report acts of violence and seek medical treatment without ramification. Once people accept that prostitution is a barrier to gender equality and a form of violence against women, their opinion changes. And that's what's happened in Sweden, where public opinion was initially hostile. Now 70% of the public support this law. Norway and Iceland have brought in laws banning the purchase of sex, and the UK has taken tentative steps towards criminalising clients. We're backward enough on societal issues in this country, and let's not make this one another. I find the use of the term voluntary prostitution and the myth of choice when entering this industry to be counterproductive to this debate. What exactly can be defined as voluntary in this situation? Someone who can't make ends meet or put food on the table. A woman whose partner tells her she only has to do it a few times but never seems to find a way out. Or maybe a young woman who has made walk the streets as a girl and knows no other way of life, or who has very limited life choices. How about someone who has a drug habit? No one chooses to enter this industry, and while not everyone is forced into it by pimps and traffickers, limited life choices have a big part to play and are something that needs to be addressed. When I started looking into prostitution, I initially would have had the same views, probably as most people in Irish society, that if women choose to be prostitutes, that it should be regulated, it should be made safe, and everything should be done to try and protect them in that choice that they've done. But that was a view that I held without really having looked into it and without really having researched it. And over the last couple of years, as I started to look at the Turn Off the Red Light campaign and looked at what they were trying to do and looked at the Swedish model and other models around the world, my views did change. And last year I attended a briefing in Boswell's Hotel where former prostitutes spoke about their experiences in life in prostitution. And I have to say that that experience was horrific. To hear firsthand the abuse, how women were forced into it, and the abuse that they went through while they were prostitutes was enough to make me change my mind. And I firmly believe that regulation hasn't worked. In Amsterdam, prostitution has been legalized for many years. But recently, Amsterdam has had to introduce an age limit for prostitutes who enter the trade, setting the age limit as being over 21, because they discovered that they can't stop underage girls being used and forced into prostitution. The police in Amsterdam estimate that 50% of brothel owners actually have a criminal record or are involved in criminal activities in the background. And that's the type of industry we're talking about. And that's the type of industry we're talking about that we want to regulate. In Germany, where prostitution is legalized as well, a major study in 2007 found that there had been no improvement in the circumstances of prostitutes working in the industry. So I think that shows that regulation can't work and doesn't work. And we need to take steps to remove the criminal element, and the only way to do that is by removing demand. I'm certainly not suggesting that this legislation in isolation is a remedy. Each woman has her own story and her own reasons for why she's in the sex industry. Cutting off her means to earn a living would certainly not better her situation. But a voluntary, individualised rehabilitation programme would need to be offered to these women to give these women alternative life choices. But this is a policy decision, not a legislative one, and so cannot be included in this bill. There are 139 men in this House and only 26 women that I am asking to make this decision on what is largely a women's rights issue. Some may think that what goes on between two so-called consenting adults by means of a private contract is no one else's business. But do we seriously believe that people have the right to buy other human beings? Dress it up as we like, it's the same thing. You have to buy the person to gain access to their body. Some may say that you can't end prostitution. I personally disagree, but that doesn't justify doing nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing else curbs human behaviour like legislation. When a person makes a conscious decision to purchase the body of another human being to do with it what they see fit, that's unacceptable human behaviour and should not be tolerated or accepted as the norm. Legislation should always reflect the values of a country, and right now bodily integrity is not valued in Ireland, even though the protection of bodily integrity is enshrined in our constitution. Gender equality is not achievable as long as women are for sale. From the years I have voiced my deep concern on this and met with former prostitutes, this much I know to be factual. The sex industry is a cruel and disturbing place run by criminals. The only feasible way to bring this industry to its knees is to cut off demand. We need to send a clear message to traffickers and pimps that women are no longer for sale in Ireland, and I think now is the time to take those steps.